Hey, Feminist Frequency Radio heads. We love that you're listening to the show, whether you're new to us or a longtime fan. We want you to know that you, yes you, can help us keep producing feminist pop culture analysis like this by heading to patreon.com/femfreak. We've got tons of stuff for backers, like episode bonuses, giveaways, and more. Check it out! And now, on with the show. So the fact that, the response from the more, festering corners of the internet was what it was, just convinced me that, no, this is not a media property that I need to spend any more time thinking about.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by two women who'd like to enjoy a Heffenweisen in peace without the world falling to pieces around them. Carolyn Pettit.
Amen, sister.
And Ebony Adams.
Did you say it wrong that time?
You did say it wrong that time. You said Heffenweisen. Well, you added an N in there for some reason. But,
God. Okay,
it's fine. It's fine.
Fun fact, I recorded this and said it right and then made a big deal about saying it wrong. And then I was like, fine, I'll redo it, and then said it wrong. And I am not doing it again. So y'all, this is what you're getting today. Yep. I am so tired.
It's okay. We'll get through this.
I don't know why I'm so tired, but this is how this episode is going to be. So if you aren't interested in that, then I'm sorry, because that's what's happening. But y'all have asked, and y'all enjoyed our last attempt at doing a whole entertainment news episode, and so we thought we would do another one. So we're going to be talking about what's going on in the world of pop culture, media, and politics, and some of it's great, and some of it's terrible, and most of it's terrible, but we're here to hold your hand through it.
Yes.
I don't know why I'm so tired. Literally, I sat down to set up for podcasting and was like, oh no, I'm so tired.
It's probably memory fatigue from the live stream.
I haven't sat at my desk since that live stream, so
yeah,
it probably
your body
is.
probably saw it and was like, oh, fuck this. I'm still tired.
Yeah, so if you don't know, we did this big-ass live stream last week, and so many of you showed up, and it was amazing, and we raised a bunch of money for 4 nonprofits, and we played a bunch of games, and had a bunch of guests, and a bunch of giveaways, and a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I can't.
Incidentally,
it was good, right, Carol? Yeah, I think it was
good. Also, incidentally, 4 Nonprofits is the name of my new alt-rock band.
And your song is going to be
reminiscent of a certain 90s hit.
I can't wait to see you guys perform at a bar in Bushwick.
You're in the band.
Like I said, I can't wait to see you guys perform at a bar in Bushwick.
But yeah, no, it was so much fun. We had so many amazing guests. We played a bunch of fun games. We played Inhuman Conditions. We played Wavelength. If you don't know what those games are, I rather than taking the time here for me to explain them to you, go head over to our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/femfreak. Watch the archived videos. See us playing these great games with hilarious and wonderful people. I think the segments were really entertaining and fun. We also had a lot of Jackbox game hilarity toward the end of the stream. And just really, obviously, a 7-hour live stream, it was exhausting and everything. And it was a lot of work to put together, but it was also a lot of fun.
Yeah, I had a great time. I got to be on for the Jackbox segment at the very end. And I had the best time, but I had a friend watching it. She called me after it was over and she's like, you just seemed so tired. And I was like,
Aww.
I felt really up, I felt like, and she was like, yeah, I don't know. And I was like, I guess this is why I do podcasts and not TV shows, because
you didn't seem tired to me.
I didn't think so either, but she was like, yeah,
fuck your friend.
Well, don't say that.
I take it back. I don't know who this person is. You're probably fine. Ebony doesn't have a lot of friends, so I assume that the ones that she would call a friend are actually lovely people.
I feel like that's a terrible thing to say.
Is it?
Yeah, Ebony doesn't have a lot of friends.
Well,
but I feel like the ones
it's true. You don't there's not a lot of people that you like.
Right. That is true. But sometimes I suffer a lot of people to be around me. So I'm bursting at the seams.
This got weird. It's fine. I made it weird. Whatever.
Keep it moving.
I feel like glancing over the things we're going to talk about today, this episode is going to be a little heavy. So I just kind of want to warn folks. There's a couple things that are a little much.
Yeah.
Not all of it.
We have so many
Stick
of
with
them,
us.
so we can just, like, we touch down, we talk about how bullshit it is, and then we head on to the next bullshit thing.
Yeah.
So, it's good.
And then we take a nap.
Yes.
Yes. All right, well, let's get started. Carolyn?
Yes. Hello. Is that your cue for me to get started here?
I thought you were going to say something, but yeah, why don't you get started with this lovely piece of news you're about to share with us that I really, really, really am so glad you included in this, because I'm so excited to find out more about this thing that you really felt the need to talk about today.
Well, I think I don't know how we could not talk about this on an episode about entertainment news. This is like one of the biggest entertainment news stories of recent weeks. So, folks, congratulations. The hashtag finally paid off. The Snyder cut of Justice League is happening in 2021. It's going to be on HBO Max. So it's a
Isn't that a porn channel?
HBO Max is like their. I thought HBO Max is going to be like their online streaming. Their version of just an exclusive.
I don't know what HBO Max is, and I was trying to make a joke, and it didn't work. Nobody laughed.
Like
it's
HBO
fine.
Go, but doesn't it also have like a lot of the like classic HBO stuff from the archives?
But doesn't HBO Go have all of that?
No, it doesn't. And the reason I know that is because I've tried to watch Fraggle Rock, and it is not on HBO Go, but apparently will be on HBO Max.
So let me give a little bit of background here for folks, just to kind of set up this story. Is that when he was working on the original cut of Justice League, at a certain point, Zack Snyder, the director who had previously made Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman in this sort of dark, gritty DC universe, cinematic universe, he had a cut at a certain point that was apparently about 4 hours long, but that's like a rough cut, not like completed visual effects and sound that's just a very rough cut, but one that I guess he said represented his like vision or version of the film. And obviously the studio was not going to put out a 4-hour version of the film. They wanted something much closer to 2 hours. He apparently got a rough version of a 2 hour and 20-minute cut to them. And then, and tragically, at around that time, his daughter did die. She committed suicide. And at that point, Joss Whedon stepped in to kind of just deliver to Warner Brothers a cut of the film that could be released. And, it was not very well received, but almost immediately on social media, like Snyder fans were convinced that the failures and flaws of the film were due to Whedon's sort of mishandling of Justice League, and that if only Zack Snyder had been able to release his true vision of the film, we all would have seen the masterpiece that it really was. And so for many years, and with no small amount of toxicity at times, the hashtag called, Release the Snyder Cut has flared up at various times on social media. And so now HBO Max, it is, what's funny though is that I think there's been so much, a lot of fans seem to have talked about the Snyder Cut as if it was just this done deal thing that was just sitting in Warner Brothers warehouse or whatever, waiting to be released, just gathering dust, when of course that's not the case at all. It was the closest thing that there ever was to an epic cut was still very, very rough and incomplete. So now there are a lot of, I think, questions and speculation. Is HBO Max going to put this out as one long film? Or, interestingly, there are rumors at least that it's going to come out in 6, I don't know how long they would break down to be, but half hour, 45-minute episodes, essentially, as a series. And that's just that makes sense from a streaming revenue point of view, because people then have to be subscribers for 2 months if they want to see each episode when it releases. But it raises all kinds of questions about like pacing and story arcs and things because when you're writing for television and you know each episode is going to be, say, an hour long or half an hour long or whatever, you obviously write to build in the arcs and the story beats around that kind of structure. But, you know, if you cut up this film to that, like, will that format even work? And, you know, another question too is, say this is still not a good film, right? When it's released in this format, which I mean, I don't think that this film is salvageable. Like, I know it's not a film I'm going to like, but you know, let's say it's just generally considered by a lot of folks to still be a pretty disastrous film. Will Snyder fans convince themselves, by and large, that it's a master, like this is the masterpiece we always, you know, knew existed and wanted to see, or will they like accept like, oh, okay, yeah, no, Batman versus Justice League does just kind of suck, or what? Like, I don't know. There's so much.
Well, I'm guessing the answer is the former.
Me too.
They will definitely convince themselves that no, this is a masterwork, and if you don't like it, you somehow just don't get it, because that is such a tired but consistent refrain from these people. Yeah. I'm thinking hard about a movie I'd be less interested in seeing, whether it comes to me in a 4-hour chunk that I have to like pack rations for, or whether I have to sit through 45-minute sessions. And I'm worried about it because we watched Justice League, the theatrical version that was released for this show, and I feel like we'll see it as a duty to watch the Snyder cut, and I already hate it.
No. Okay, I got some thoughts. Are you ready? One.
Yeah.
I know some of the stuff that got cut out, and y'all do not want to see that. Two,
when you say y'all, you mean us specifically, right?
Yes.
You don't mean like Snyder fans. It might be like stuff
no,
that Snyder fans will
want to see it because it's sexist as fuck.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Two, Zack Snyder's a piece of shit. Three, the thing that troubles me the most about this whole story is that this is the same vile, toxic fandoms that go after female actors, that go after anything outside of the status quo of like male-dominated bullshit. Yeah. And they just got capitulated to. And the cost of doing this is so fucking high. There's quotes that it's going to cost like $20 million to produce this fucking thing.
The Hollywood Reporter story that I is my main source for this story, I think posited an estimated cost of $20 or even up to $30 million. Now, the thing is, like, it may be fairly close to a sure thing of money that they're going to get back because of the ravenous, you know, fever pitch demand for this in streaming revenue. I don't know how those those projections break down, but yes, like obviously, like that's the thing though, is there is production work, like all this stuff are scenes that haven't had the necessary post-production work done on them, you know, and they're like, are there going to be things where they have to bring in Ben Affleck or Henry Cavill to like do VO of ADR or whatever it's called, of lines that they're going to like just kind of awkwardly superimpose over existing footage, you know, all kinds of just questions like that.
You mean like put Henry Cavill's mustache?
Right.
I'm just going to say that the people who want this shit are fucking assholes. Like, I don't care. You can quote me on that. Like, this is fully, this is just capitulating to like toxic online fucking bullying. And I don't use the word bullying lightly, but it really is the people who have all of this time and energy to build these huge online campaigns that may or may not actually be huge, but feel huge, right? They're the same people that attack. Like, they're the same people that do really aggressive online harassment campaigns, or even like softer trolling campaigns or whatever, right? It's people with a fuck ton of time. And it makes me mad that it makes me mad that they're getting this.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah.
Like of all of the things that we could do and all of the media that could be made and all the the director's cuts that could actually be interesting and contribute positively to the world, we're getting Zack fucking Snyder's goddamn Justice League, because it's certainly not going to be better than the garbage pile that it was.
God, it was just so
It was
boring.
so bad.
I mean, listen, fan capitulation is my favorite 2-word phrase. Like, I love that shit. You want to give me another cut of Ridley Scott's Blade Runner? I'll buy it and watch it. You know, like, this shit is for me. But this movie, I just could not rouse myself to the slightest bit of interest. So the fact that, like, the response from the more, you know, festering corners of the internet was what it was, just convinced me that no, this is not a media property that I need to spend any more time thinking about, right? And I mean, I enjoyed Wonder Woman. I didn't, you know, love it the way a lot of people did, but it was fine. But it was really just as far as I was willing to go into the DC universe. I'm excited to see what Wonder Woman 1984 is going to look like. I am interested in the Snyder cut insofar as I wonder what this is going to look like in terms of, like, Wonder Woman's delayed summer release, right? We're not going to get it when we thought we were going to. And if that potentially gets pushed back, you know, into later 2020. And then on the heels of that, we have the Snyder Justice cut, you know, as opposed to looking forward to new properties, which I'm sure DC was looking to do. Like, it just feels like such a, I don't know, such a like stagnant way of dealing with a really fertile property. And again, I couldn't care less about DC, but even I know that, like, there are interesting stories to be told there. But no, it's like these dude bros on the internet, you know, and they're just like, no, we want you to recuperate our muscled white dudes, and we're not going to get off this park bench until you do it.
Yeah.
Can't wait to watch it on episode 178 of Feminist Frequency Radio.
Oh, God. Don't encourage them, Ebony.
I'm trying to convince us not to do it. And I know that you're saying no now, but I have a feeling, Caro, what do you think? Do you think we're going to wind up having to watch this? Because I feel like we are.
I mean, I'm usually the person in that camp who's like, well, we kind of have to talk about this because of its cultural significance, even though we know it's terrible.
All right. I will watch it if the three of us watch it together.
Like in a room together? That's not happening anymore.
No shit, Ebony. We have to watch it together over the internets. Yeah. And drugs have to be involved.
Sold.
And popcorn. That's
Sold.
It. That's what I have to. You have to suffer. We have to suffer through it together in real time. If we have to,
I'm gonna start working on a special guest.
Oh my God. Okay, let's move on from this. Yeah. Roe versus Wade is a court case that you have probably heard of because it is the court case that legalized abortion, and it made abortion legal throughout all. Federally, right, throughout all U.S. states. At the time, legal was abortion selectively in certain states. Roe versus Wade is it's been contested since it won, really, right? That there's loads of. What am I trying to say? Why are we even doing this today? All right.
There are people out there in the United States who strongly
disagree. Yes, abortion rights are under attack constantly. They have been for a long time.
Forever.
It's worse now than it's been in a long time. And in some states, it's ostensibly illegal to get an abortion, even though it's illegal to make it illegal. But it's so hard to get one that it might as well be. So there was an interesting thing that came out. There's a documentary about Roe versus Wade and Jane Roe, who was the defendant in Roe versus Wade. Her name is actually Norma Corvey, and she had a deathbed confession. So I didn't actually know about any of this until this came out. So Norma Corvey, aka Jane Roe, apparently switched sides in the abortion debate. So while she was for abortion and her name is a part of this huge case that legalized abortion, at some point shortly thereafter, she joined the anti-abortion movement and was like a very vocal spokesperson to make abortion illegal again. As she's dying on her deathbed, she literally says, she confesses that she actually took money from pro-life advocates in order to do that work, in order to be that spokesperson. She's like, I just went in front of cameras and said what they said. And she's like, and I don't really care who gets an abortion or not. So that is complicated and interesting. And as I went down this rabbit hole, I realized that this is such a weird, complicated thing because humans are complicated and humans can change their minds and humans can do things for different reasons. And but as you listen to people start talking about this woman and who she was, it just, I almost didn't want to bring this up at all because it's so weird. But I do think it's important to mention because, like, the conservative right often has more money than the conservative left, and they're willing to put it into these things, and they're willing to be nefarious, and they're willing to, like, to do all of this stuff. And I don't know. I think it's gross and disgusting and troubling.
Yeah. I encourage anyone who would like to listen to like reproductive justice activists on Jane Roe and the issues brought up by this new documentary to follow the Twitter feed of friend of the pod, Renee Bracey Sherman, who is amazing. She's the founder and executive director of We Testify, which is an organization that's all about representations of people who have abortions. And so, like, she really gets into the really tangled and complicated narratives that are at play here, particularly as articulated by Norma herself, you know, about her background and like her understanding and how it, you know, mutated and changed. And yes, absolutely, the way that she has been like deployed as a rhetorical figure, both by people on the left and the right. I obviously am aligned with one side and not the other, but the fact that like, as a person, she had to constantly sort of like fight to feel her way through this without like the necessary support. And I'm horrified by, you know, what this turned into. But yeah, it's tough. It's complicated.
Absolutely. I also, if we're going to shout out places that are doing work around these issues, I definitely want to shout out Liz Winstead's organization, Abortion Access Front. They're awesome. They do like all of these events to raise money for abortion clinics, and they actually like will go in and help abortion clinics. They're like, you need your fence painted? Well, great, we'll paint your fence for you. They do a lot of work. So I would definitely check them out as another organization in this space.
I'm looking at a picture of Renee and Liz together right now.
Yeah. I don't think we've ever had Liz on the podcast. We should do that. Yeah. She's great. She is wild. All right. So yeah, anyways, we're going to link for all of the stories that we talk about today. We'll share links, and like, you know, I haven't watched the documentary, but you might want to go down a weird rabbit hole of this whole story because it's mind boggling. Ebony, what do you got for us?
What I got for you is a little tidbit. Oh boy. Okay. So, I will give you a little background. If you are someone who doesn't spend a lot of time on the internet, if you are a white person or foreign, you perhaps have not heard of Charlamagne the God, who is an American radio host. He co-hosts The Breakfast Club, which is a phenomenally popular radio show, an audience largely of Black folks. You know, like it's hard to overstate Charlamagne's influence. In like the urban markets in particular, but in, you know, kind of Black popular culture as a whole. So anyways, going on The Breakfast Show or The Breakfast Club is like de rigueur for candidates who are trying to court the Black vote, you know? And sometimes it's a, you know, like mutual love fest. Sometimes it's, you know, a little bit more awkward and tense depending upon said candidates' kind of, you know, proximity to Black communities. But so recently, your boy, Joe Biden, and I say your boy, I'm talking about people in the audience here, not Anita and Carol. Yeah,
I was about to be like,
but old Uncle Joe went on The Breakfast Club and, you know, had an interview that was, you know, as I say, occasionally awkward, occasionally tense. But the point is, near the end of it, Joe Biden said something to the host, Charlamagne, that is so emblematic of the way that, like, this kind of, like, centrist, democratic, you know, traditionalist, I won't even call them left-wing, but just, like, you know, old-school liberal polity, you know, treats the Black community and the Black vote. And I mean specifically takes it for granted. So, you know, as they're wrapping up the interview, Charlamagne's like, but hey, I may have more questions. You need to come back when you're in New York. And Joe's like, listen, if you don't know if you're supporting me or Trump, you ain't black. He says literally, you ain't black.
It's so painful.
It is so
painful.
Gross. It's so gross. It's so fucked up. And it's so infuriating. Like, I'm so tired of having my vote assumed, especially as a black woman, right?
Yeah.
And the ways in which, depending upon the election result, people will say like, oh, thank God for black women, or we should have looked, we should have listened to black women. Like, I'm so tired of hearing this. I'm so tired of seeing it in my Twitter feed. You need to do the work to court the voters. You cannot take any group for granted. And the assumption that based upon your invented fantasies of knowing some black lifeguard named Corn Pop or some shit, back in the year 203 BC, I'm supposed to have some relationship with you. Get the fuck out of here. But what really disturbs me is that there are huge numbers of, there is a big generational divide, in Democratic support, wherein in the South, among older black folks, Joe Biden does have a huge base of support, and I am so worried that we will once again throw our tremendous electoral weight behind someone who has been proven to only consider us in and where he needs to. Which is never, up until the point where he needs us to actually get his name on a ballot or, be taken across the finish line, but never apart from that. And the dude has been behind some of the most noxious policies that have hurt the black community. Like, oh my God, I'm infuriated. If you ain't, if you don't know if you're voting for me or Trump, you ain't black. Get the fuck.
Right. He has a history of kind of palling around with segregationists in the Senate. He supported the crime bill that was just a terribly racist and oppressive piece of legislation. And his whole, he's had this whole attitude of entitlement to the nomination and I guess you could say by extension the presidency in so many ways, so often telling voters when they ask him some even vaguely challenging question like, well then just vote for the other guy. Like he won't even because that's how, but this is obviously as you rightly say, like a particularly egregious and offensive example of this entitlement taken to its extremes, but it is a thread that has run through his entire campaign, and like one part of the damage that it has done that I think have to acknowledge too is that it gives the Trump campaign a little gift on a silver platter as well, because Trump can now attack, even though Trump is, of course, the most explicitly white supremacist president in our recent history. This absolutely allows Trump to attack Biden for being racist, right? Because Trump can get away because of how his base sees him and thinks about themselves and their own attitudes. Trump can get away with like positioning himself as a candidate who's for freedom and for America and and for equality for everybody, even though of course we all know that he isn't. But he can say he can take this line and say Biden's a racist and it will work for him. Like it will at least shore up his base, right? And that's just Biden, even just on a strategic level, it is just so disastrous, to give Trump these kinds of gifts, because we have to acknowledge that Trump, even though he is far, far right, he can attack candidates in a sense from the quote unquote left. Well,
and this also goes back to what we were talking about with toxic this more conservative toxic internet culture, is that they often do this. They don't really give a shit about racism, but they will cultivate a fire about sexist comments or racist comments and blow it up so that the left candidate or the left the more lefty filmmaker or whatever have you is then raked through the coals, both by the right who don't really care and by who would ostensibly be their own fan base. It's like really elaborate trolling.
It is, and I think, we want to be clear here. The danger is not that by saying this absolute fucking bullshit, that Joe Biden is going to then provoke Black Americans to vote for Trump. The danger is that already disenfranchised and already disillusioned with American politics as it stands, people will stay home. And yes, I absolutely have my concerns with and my problems with the way that our so-called democracy works in this country. But the fact is, we have a certain system right now. And if the progressive ideals that we hold so dear, have any chance of being executed on even the smallest of levels, it depends upon, unfortunately, people getting out to vote at very hyper local levels and at the national level. I do believe that. And so the danger is not that Black people are going to be like, oh, okay, well, fuck you, Joe Biden, I'm going to go vote for Trump. It's that people will stay home, which is just as disastrous a result,
I mean, yeah. Also, we live in California. Whether we vote for Biden or not, he's going to win California. So, our voting system is so fucked up. It matters if you live in swing states or right wing states, right? It's just, it makes me so mad. Also, I probably said this before, but is it not fucking insane that we are in the middle of a global pandemic and the Democrats decide to make Joe Biden the candidate and not the person who's been advocating for fucking universal health care?
And that they're apparently vetting Amy Klobuchar.
I could not
this whole week I've just been
that, man.
Klobuchar,
and who the fuck do they think they're courting? I don't.
They don't care.
Right.
All they care about is holding on to their existing power structures, which is not in the benefit of the actual public. And it's not listening to at all. And it never has been listening to the needs of the actual population. Right. The other thing that I didn't mention, but during when I was doing the research about Roe versus Wade or that story, I already knew this, but over 70% of Americans are for abortion across party lines.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right? Across ideological lines. It is not... The ways that politics play out in this country is not even remotely representative of the individuals in this country and what they want.
Mm-hmm.
There's this really great article, and I'm blanking on where it was, that just recently came across my Twitter timeline. But it's a nice laying out of the history of the abortion fight in this country. And it talks about how it was an issue that was deliberately picked up in the 70s by the ultra right wing of the party and evangelicals because they knew that segregation was no longer an issue upon which they would be able to advance their political aims. It was a very craven and mercenary choice, and it is by no means something that, evangelicals have always cared about in this country or that people on the right have always cared about. It is something that has happened in comparatively recent memory, and it was done for deliberate political ends. I'll try and find that article and post the link.
And please do. And I didn't mean to move us away from the Joe Biden's racism.
I'm ready to move on because, oh boy, it reduces me to blubbering.
Yeah. It's all related, but I know we're specifically talking about that issue, and I didn't mean to digress out of that. Fuck him and his racist shit. Also, the way he phrased it, that's the thing, Carolyn.
Listen.
I know we need to move on, but the thing is, Carolyn, you're talking about how this could be used against him, and why is he giving these gifts to Trump? He doesn't know that. He's well, I was the vice president under the first black president, so I'm I'm down, whatever.
Of course, but I mean, it's just staggering that he's so strategically inept, right?
So inept.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on from that to something else. Carolyn.
Yeah. So this is, unfortunately, this is a particularly tragic story, but one that I felt we had to at least mention. Hana Kimura, who was a Japanese wrestler, female wrestler, 22 years old, known, I think, for being very, for being very stylish, very, striking as a theatrical, as a performer, and as a wrestler, died almost certainly by suicide. The details I think surrounding her death have not been released in any detail as of yet. However, what happened, or I think what we do know, is that so Kimura was on on a Netflix or a Japanese reality series called Terrace House, which I think is on Netflix, and apparently, due to some incident or some interaction on the show, perhaps there was a great deal of bullying, like an online harassment, directed at Kimura. And she, so it was a few days ago, she tweeted things like, I'm sure on Instagram, she posted a picture of herself and her cat and a cat with the message, "I love you, have a long, happy life, I'm sorry," which caused a great deal of alarm, of course, and concern about her well-being. And I think when, later that day or that night, it was confirmed that she had died. So this has provoked, as I think, these incidents sometimes do, a new, or at least cast new sort of energy into the conversation around online bullying and harassment on social media, and the possible consequences, what it actually can do to a person to be the target of massive, mobs of online, online abuse. So yeah, that's...
Yeah, we talk about these things, and it can be, obviously we here at Feminist Frequency have, personal reactions to this based upon like the very personal experiences we have. But if you have not personally been the victim or the target of cyberbullying to whatever level and whatever intensity, it can be easy to think of these things as abstract and to forget that there are very real people at both ends, of the computer screen or of the screens or whatever. And I never watched Terrace House, but when you shared this story, it was just like, a young woman is dead.
Yeah.
She is dead. And that's this whole notion that you have to have a thick skin, or it's just words, or, talk back to these people is such a just really gross dismissal of how horrific it can be to be at the receiving end of this kind of treatment. This concerted treatment,
right. And these conversations can be complicated by the fact that sometimes a person, a public figure, will say or do something that is legitimately fucked up or oppressive or harmful to others, and be, called out for it. And then people will frame that as online harassment. And, so I don't know. I think obviously we still need to do a lot of work around just even understanding or setting, understanding what online harassment is and isn't. And, but yes, I don't have any answers or any big observations here. Just a tragic story that I felt we had to acknowledge on the show.
I want to add, if you're feeling depressed or having a hard time, or your friends or someone in your family is, please call helplines. They're here for that. Again, whether it's just to have someone to talk to for yourself, or to get support around how to support your friends who are having, or your family members who are having a hard time. In the US, there's a lot of great lines like the Suicide Helpline, the Trans Lifeline, Trevor Project, RAINN. We're starting a hotline. It's not open yet, but it will be soon. And I think that, part of my desire to start a hotline really is because it feels like I want to normalize help-seeking behaviors when it comes to online harassment, right? Like, I want to normalize the fact that this is real and it's serious and it impacts us in really intense ways. And just because it's online doesn't mean it's not real.
Right.
So that's all I'm going to add to this.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the next thing we're going to talk about is a really hard emotional shift. So cool.
Yeah. But
All right, so I wanted to bring up. I want to talk about video games.
Yeah.
A little meta on video games. So Jeff Keighley announced a Summer Fest, which is a digital games event that's taking place. It's already started. It's going May through August with several different events. And it has events like EA Play, where they're going to unveil new games. Ubisoft is a part of it. Day of the Devs. We're going to see stuff from Cyberpunk. There's a lot. Like, I can't go through all of it, but there's a lot happening. And it's an interesting thing that I wanted to bring up, and maybe, Carol, you have some thoughts too, because it feels a little bit, and I'm not saying this in any judgmental way, but it feels like it's filling the void of E3 being canceled. And what that means, also the Steam Game Festival is going to end on the opening night of Gamescom, which is going all digital as well. And Gamescom is a huge European games event. Right. And so E3 is canceled. It sounds like this has taken whatever place E3 would have done digitally if they were going to do anything. And we've been talking, not necessarily Carolyn and I, but like the larger games community have been talking for years about, is E3 relevant? Is it still the way to do things? And I think with the shutdowns of everything and the replacement of digital events, it's forcing us to confront that question a little bit more intensely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the relevance of E3 in particular was something that was already being increasingly called into question year after year after year, as more companies, I think, realized that they could get just a direct line right to their audience, their potential players, customers, etc., just by doing their own like digital online presentations and stuff, and kind of cutting out all the costs and the middle, the people of E3, because you can just like reach people directly now. Just do like a online presentation or whatever, and it's hard to imagine after this year. E3 coming back the way that it has existed in the past. That's not to say that there won't still be physical shows, and I just think that they won't be necessarily on the same scale, or that they won't have the same perceived like importance as like the one annual coming together of like the entire industry to reveal like all the upcoming big games and everything.
So here's the thing: you were talking about the middle person. Does that mean that Jeff Keighley and his team,
etc.?
Yeah, but so like E3 was run by the ESA,
right?
And big event. You would have these huge, you'd have these huge booths. You would have days of press conferences, and then you'd have behind the scenes meetings with journalists, usually, right? Where you're demoing the game and that sort of thing. Now, the thing is that it's not earlier this year, not like a month ago. I don't know what time is, y'all. Yeah. Microsoft did. Xbox did a whole presser online.
Yep.
But the thing is that, are we just replacing E3 with Jeff Keighley's team? Do you know what I mean? Is it just because now it's under this banner of Summerfest game or Summer Game Fest? So it's just another organization who might just be doing it in a fresher way, which also it might not be a bad thing.
Right.
It's still another organizing body.
That's true. And I suspect, Keighley, I guess has always been a savvy business person. I don't really necessarily. I don't like the Game Awards. I don't really like the influence, the things that he does, as they're not for me or what have you. But as a business person, I have to maybe, he saw an opportunity here. But I think, the tide was turning that way already. I mean, Nintendo has been doing
completely.
Nintendo Directs. They're doing their own thing for a few years now. And I think Microsoft, Sony, etc. now recognize that they can do their own pressers and stuff just direct to viewers with or without the branding of say Summerfest or like some sort of unifying event. I think that for now that kind of branding is beneficial for potential viewers to think of this as this ongoing online kind of festival. But I also think that companies recognize that they don't need those figures and those organizing bodies in the way that they once did.
Yeah, I think when I was on What's Good Games, we talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
And Andrea Renee brought up a point of like, you can never replace the in-person like demos. Like you can't replace the being in the same space, and I know that everyone is doing the best that they can, but so like I'm not necessarily an advocate for E3. I'm not necessarily against it either, even though it's kind of it's kind of a shit show. But like the in-person stuff, like we might just have to give that up for a while. Like, well, we are for sure, but like I don't know if there's a good way to replace that. We got invited. We're not doing this, but we got invited to be in like the equivalent of a digital booth, which is to be in a Zoom room for an hour and anyone can come in and talk to you. And I'm like, cool. Like I totally get why that is, I get why that's the replacement, but that sounds awful.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like that doesn't sound the same thing as like someone just walking around the show floor or whatever. So, but again, and I say all that with absolutely no judgment or hard feelings towards any of that, because we're all trying to figure out what's going to work now and what isn't going to work. So yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious to see how this, how the Game Fest plays out. Carolyn, you and I have watched the pressers every year online anyways. So I've never actually gone into one of those halls. I have no interest in seeing that in person. But it is different. So anyways, keep an eye out. And if you're into games, you're probably going to want to check this out generally to see like what's coming up and all that fun stuff. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Ebony, what other uplifting news do you have for us today?
Jesus. Something so good. Okay. A lot of times, Twitter, the internets, whatever, will be just like whipped up into a frenzy based purely upon the headline for a piece that, a headline which often ill serves the actual, writing that the author has put together. But I would just like you to know that in this case, the headline of the piece that Andrea Askowitz wrote absolutely is of a piece with the just bonkers reality bubble this woman lives in. So this was published in The Independent on the 15th. My family are the rule-breaking, lockdown-flouting, entitled Americans you've heard about during the coronavirus pandemic. We disregarded the rules, well, because we wanted to. It is mind-boggling in its tone deafness and lack of self-awareness on almost every axis. I will read to you the beginning and then a couple other key bon mots from Ms. Askowitz. In August 2019, my kids and I moved to Madrid. Our plan was to spend a year in Spain, learn Spanish, see the world, learn to live less like spoiled Americans. Right off the bat.
Already, oh my God.
You know that you're in for just the most delectable bullshit. So you have the privilege and the resources to move to another country. And by the way, the fact that, brown peoples of the world do not have the ability to have that kind of like transnational mobility without having their, intentions and motivations heavily questioned and without them being policed is another conversation. But we wanted to learn to live less like spoiled Americans by apparently doing what spoiled Americans do, which is treating the entire globe as, a resort. So anyways, this woman is with her children, and I think it's important to know that she is a queer woman. So her wife travels to Madrid 1 week out of the month. The rest of the time, she is back in Miami. The woman who wrote this article is in Madrid with their, I believe, 3 children. And she mentions how she and the children have been inside their 1,000 square foot apartment for 46 days, how they're getting, desperate to leave, etc. Understandable, And so when the Spanish government, reveals that they are not going to be reopening schools, Andrea Askovitz and her children pack up, fly to Miami, and to go stay at a house they have there. It's unclear to me whether she stayed with her mom or just in the same area where her mom lived, like the same compound. The point is, once they get there, and I want you to know, like, they've had to fly, they've had to take like 2 plane journeys, they've had to go through all of these different airports, do all this traveling. They have to quarantine when they get to this country. Andrea's wife, Vicky, in an attempt to, see her family, has to lie at a police checkpoint to get through. And this is where it really goes off the rails, because when Vicky talks about what she told the police, it's that, listen, I'm a single mother, I left my children alone. She is lying to the police. And her story, her narrative about how she felt is, I don't even know how to explain to you how, as a Black woman who is intimately familiar with what actual police brutality is, to have this white woman say the fact that she was peacefully detained by these roadside deputies for an hour is police brutality, just took my breath away. Yeah. It absolutely took my breath away. They held me for an hour. It was police brutality. The cop at the checkpoint looked at my paperwork and told me to make a U-turn. That's when I started crying, blah, 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 etc. And you're like, lady, there are some of us who deal with this all the time, and our encounters with the police are not something we can lie our way into or out of, and the results are often deadly for us. The fact that she is playing with this and that she has no sense of how this will land, that the crushing reality that many people who are not in her privileged position, like, it just blew my mind. You guys, I can't tell you how bonkers this thing is.
The wife that was home with the kids hid under the bed because she called and said, I'm coming home with a cop, hide.
Yeah.
Like, I read this article because I read the excerpt from the tweet that Ebony shared with us, and I was like, wait, what? And so I read the whole article, and that headline, I was like, you fuck off. Yeah. But then I was like, okay, editors write headlines. It's the Independent, whatever. But if you read the article, I couldn't understand it. Like, the wife is talking about her wife like she's a lying asshole. Like, there's all of these like, the articulation in it, or sorry, the framing of it. I was like, this is going to end with a divorce? Like, I don't understand. I don't know why this story is being told. I don't know why you hate your wife and you're writing about her like this. I know that's not the point of why you're bringing this up. The point is privilege, and I don't want to undermine that. I don't understand the article or why it exists or why
I don't either.
Put
but
this out there.
I didn't get the sense that she was being critical of her wife's choices at all. To my mind, it read as if she was saying, like, we were put in this desperate position because even though we knew it was wrong, even though we knew it was ill-advised and contraindicated, we behaved contrary to the guidelines that had been set out to protect people. And when we were pulled short on it, we lied to get what we needed. And then when the consequences perhaps started to, fall down upon us, we chose to lie and encourage our children to lie over this. And it was like, you start this piece with the privilege of being able to move and live somewhere internationally for a year. And then the middle of the piece is we have the privilege of, reversing that position. And then the third is we have the privilege of lying to the police and making it out, okay at the end, and no one ends up dead.
And it's so obnoxious. She says, the truth is we were the exact people the cops wanted to keep out. We had been in one of the most infected cities. We rode on all these planes, but we disregarded the rules because we wanted to. Like, even if you are the asshole that thinks that way, why would you put that out in the world for everyone to read?
Because you have to have, again, such a huge lack of self-awareness, right? But I think during this period, we are getting so many stories of people like, chafing against the restrictions. And yes, it absolutely is understandable, but you editors, you got to serve your writers better. Like, don't allow them to show their asses like this before, because some things you should keep to yourself and your little friend group. Like, I can't imagine thinking that this was going to land with anything other than just like a dull thud. What the fuck?
All right, Karen.
Exactly.
Two Karens married to each other. Look at that. Mm. All right. Okay, we have 6 minutes left, so let's do the next as the next batch of news as a lightning round. Okay.
Right on.
Great, Carolyn.
Okay, Lana Del Rey posted on Instagram about so she named a bunch of very popular, very famous female artists, mostly Black women. She named among them Cardi B, Nicki Minaj, Beyonce, and she said that, all these women, quote, have had number ones with songs about being sexy, wearing no clothes, fucking, cheating, etc. Can I please go back to singing about being embodied, feeling beautiful by being in love, even if the relationship is not perfect, of dancing for money or whatever I want without being crucified or saying that I'm glamorizing abuse. Anyway, it's a lengthy post. That was just a very small part of it. And this post, speaking of things, as Ebony said, like maybe that you should just share with your little friend group rather than like posting to the internet. It's not that I don't think there are legitimate conversations to be had about like feminism and where art like this belongs or doesn't belong within feminism, and an artist who writes this maybe at times feeling like excluded or ostracized or whatever, like those are big important questions, and I have very strong feelings about them myself that I'm not going to get into. But anyway, by starting with like all of these Black women, as if positioning them as if they've been like exempt from these kinds of conversations or issues or whatever, and have had the freedom to do all this without, being anyway, etc. It sparked so much debate and conversation on social media, etc. Yeah,
there's so much here that is just like, here. What the
like
fuck?
This, we could do a whole episode. Oh yeah, literally could do a whole episode 100%. On this.
How like. So what she wrote, again, I agree with you, Carol. There is a conversation to be had about the sexualization of female performers. Cool. Like, yes. Whether it's self-objectification, whether it's market forces, blah, yes. blah, blah, whatever.
Absolutely.
But the fact that she literally, like, couldn't name a white woman that does that, or that is, like, a part of that same kind of category of critique, that
or she overwhelmingly
like,
names...
Her default...
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
her default is to name women of color? Like,
yeah.
How about the fact that she contrasts the style and the aesthetics of those women of color, largely women of color, with her glamorous, delicate whiteness, as if that is somehow exempt from the sexual jurisdiction, as if that's somehow not sexual, as if that's somehow like
she's critiqued
more
for
rarefied,
glamorizing.
More intellectual. Yeah, it's bullshit.
She's critiqued for glamorizing abusive relationships. Those things are not mutually exclusive. Like
right.
the critiques of what she does and the critiques of what the other musicians do, like those critiques can all exist at the same fucking at the exact same time. Right?
Yeah, I saw a tweet that was like, Lana Del Rey, you're not special. I love your music, but you are not remotely close to like the only white woman who has sung about like fucked up relationships. I have PJ Harvey, Florence and the Machine, Tori Amos, among Kate Bush, like just waiting on line one to talk to you. Like,
oh, you just named all my teenage years right there. I got a little warm feeling all of a sudden. All right. Thanks for bringing up that Carol.
I mean, how could we not?
I was surprised that I was surprised Ebony didn't bring it up, to be honest.
I wanted to, but I thought it'd be too obvious.
That's true.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Fine. Anyway,
it's fine.
Go
Everything's
on.
good. Okay. Mine is just that Tuca and Bertie, which was one of my favorite shows of the last several years, is an animated show by Lisa Hannawalt on Netflix. The main voice actors are Tiffany Haddish, Ali Wong, Steven Yeun. We talked about it. Go check out the episode where we talked about it. I think we all really loved this show. It actually was funny and sexy and complicated and emotionally rich and just like... There were boobs on walls and shit. Like, I was here for it. It got canceled by Netflix because Netflix is garbage fire when it comes to choosing what to review, to continue. Netflix is willing to take quote unquote risks, but they won't, unless their internal numbers that they won't release don't back up like what they think is viable. They won't renew. And so it didn't get renewed for a second season, and everyone was very sad and pissed off and annoyed. And it turns out that Adult Swim picked it up. So we will be getting more Tuca and Bertie.
Yay!
Yay. All right, Ebony, wrap it. Take us home.
All right. So Anita and I, on our Star Trek Picard podcast, often touched on themes of disability as they resonated through Star Trek Picard and, reflected back on previous iterations. Excuse me. Obviously in and through like Captain Picard. Admiral Picard, excuse me, his past, having been assimilated and then de-assimilated from the Borg. But anyways, I found this really great piece. Oh God, I'm blanking on her name, but we'll share the link. But it's a piece about Star Trek Picard and
Sara
Star Trek as a
Luterman.
friend. Yes, exploring disability in Star Trek Picard and the kinds of ways that it is opening up an understanding of disability and the machine body and body minds that is not limited by, the kind of ableism that, has been rife in so much popular media. So we're talking about like the Borg specifically, but like Picard's sort of understanding of what it means to be human, the XBs, which if you have not seen any of Picard, I encourage you to check it out because the show, it tries for so much, and although it doesn't always reach, the stars that it's shooting for, it is really exceedingly ambitious and in a lot of ways. And one of those ways is the routes that it takes to explore like different species understandings of like what the embodied, like where the soul lies and where embodiment lies and what it means to have like machinery, as an addendum or as an artifact that helps you live, and whether that takes away from, in the case of humans, your humanity. So yeah, it was a really interesting piece. I encourage people to check it out. I encourage people to check out Star Trek Picard. And that's it.
Woo! We did it.
We did it.
All right, y'all. Thanks so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. We'll be back next week with another episode of not entertainment news. We'll be doing something else. Stay tuned to find out more. You can find us everywhere great podcasts are found. And if you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review us. And you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and all the social medias at FemFreak. You can help us keep making this podcast by backing us over at patreon.com/FemFreak. And some great people help us make this every week. The show is engineered by Rob Pera. Carrie Stimson provides technical support. Artwork is by Jamie Varon. And our intro music is by Phil Circus. So we'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Later.